Now to make the magic happen. In the game controller script, just above the start method, add the awake method. This method executes prior to the execution of the start method. Add the don't destroy on load method and pass this.gameObject as a parameter. The this keyword refers to the game controller class, basically the script or component. So this.gameObject is a property that refers to the game object the script is attached to, which in this case is the game controller game object. This line of code is saying that we do not want the game controller to be destroyed when another scene is loaded. When we save this and go back to Unity, we see nothing different in the hierarchy. But when we press play, we see the game controller becomes a child of a don't destroy on load object. When we press the start button, the splash scene is destroyed in the hierarchy and the scene 01 is loaded as expected. But now the game controller from the splash scene is still in the hierarchy. And pressing escape still opens the game settings. Now we just have to deal with any errors or unexpected behavior in this scene. In the console, there are many warnings related to having two audio listeners. We'll come back to this. For now, let's scroll to the top and see the errors. I usually tackle the top error first because sometimes resolving that error will resolve some of the errors under it. This is an unassigned reference exception, which is similar to a null reference exception. It says the variable load panel of load scene has not been assigned. So this sounds like in the load scene script, there is a property named load panel which was never assigned a value. Where is the load script in scene 01? I believe it was on the door. When we hit the door, we load a new scene. Let's stop playing and then find scene 01 in the project window and open it. Be sure to save the previous scene. In the hierarchy, I can find the door under my warehouse game object. I'll double-click that to zoom and focus on the door, and orbit around it to have a better view. In the inspector, I see where the load scene script is attached, and I see the value for the load panel property has not been set. Normally, we could just drag in the load panel to set the property. However, the load panel is not in this scene yet because it is part of the game controller that is only in the scene after the splash scene has been loaded. In this case, there is no clear reason why the load panel property needs to be public, so there is no reason that this needs to be set in the editor. Let's set the value of load panel in the script instead. Click on the gearbox and select Edit Script. Change the load panel property to private since we do not want it showing in the editor. In the start method, set the load panel property to a game object with the name of load panel. This script is attached to the door, so the start method will not run until the door is instantiated. The door will be instantiated when this scene loads, and the game controller with the load panel will exist before that. Additionally, the load panel should be active in the hierarchy when scene 01 loads, so the find method should be able to successfully find the load panel. Let's try it out. Save this, go back to the splash scene, show the console, press play, and then press the start button. Excellent! The scene loads and the load panel disappears. In the console, we have only one error left. The variable water lens of camera behavior has not been assigned. Sounds like a very similar problem, so we just stop the game, open scene 01 in the editor, find the camera behavior script, which, if you completed the challenges from Unit 7, is attached to the underwater game object. There is the script in the inspector, and surprise, the water lens property has not been set. Again, there is no reason this property needs to be public, so we open up the script to edit it. Set the water lens property to private. I am also going to change the name of the property to water panel because I believe this better matches the name of the water panel game object that is now part of the game controller. In the start method, give the water panel property a value by finding the game object with the name of water panel. Finally, because I renamed the property, I need to change every instance of water lens to water panel. Let's save this. Back in Unity, we wait a moment to make sure there are no compile errors, and press clear to clear away the old errors, and then open up the splash scene to test it out. Play the game, and press the Start button. Excellent! The water panel is turned off when the scene loads. We do have a null reference exception on line 11 of the camera behavior script. So let's stop the game. Looking at this line, water panel must not have a value, which is a bit strange because we are giving it a value in the previous line of code. However, if the water panel is deactivated when the find method runs, the water panel would remain with a null value. Recall that we decided to manage the water panel through the game controller, so creating another property to the water panel here is not needed, and in fact is risky because the water panel may be deactivated when the find method runs. Let's replace the water panel property here with a private property of type GameController named GC. By having access to the GameController class, we will have access to all of its public properties and methods. In the Start method, change the line that initializes the water panel property to instead initialize the GC property. We can remove the line of code deactivating the water panel because we already have moved this code into the GameController script. In the onTriggerEnter method, replace this line of code with gc.showWaterPanel, and replace this line of code with gc.hideWaterPanel. With this script saved, go back to Unity. Clear away the older errors. Let's press play. Notice the water panel is not showing. If I press Start, I saw the load panel for a moment and the water panel was not there. And more importantly, the errors are gone. Run over to the water to make sure the water panel still activates and deactivates as I enter and exit the water. So far, so good. When I press Escape, the game is paused and the settings appear, and we have no errors in the console. But we are getting these warnings that there are 2 audio listeners in the scene. We'll get back to those in just a moment. First, it is always good to use meaningful names for properties, methods, or even entire classes. I do not like the name of our camera behavior script. Originally, this script was attached to the first-person character camera, so the name made sense. Now the script is attached to the underwater game object and is only used to check collisions occurring with the water. So I am going to go to the camera behavior script, change the class name to water behavior, and save the file as waterbehavior.cs. Back in Unity, in the scripts folder, I see the water behavior script. I will go ahead and delete the camera behavior script. The only game object this script was attached to was in Scene 01, so open that up. When I select my underwater game object and look in the inspector, I see there is a missing script attached. Click on the gearbox by the script name and remove the component. Locate the water behavior script in the project window again, and drag it to attach it to the underwater game object. We have to go back to the splash scene to test this out. Be sure to save. And it seems to still be working with no errors. It may seem tedious to constantly be improving organization and code readability within your game projects and scripts, but in the long run, especially for large projects with many developers, this will save a great deal of time.